Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen, and today I am back with my prediction for this year's winner of the International Booker Prize for 2024. Now, this is a prize that I hold near and dear to my heart. I love translated fiction, and this prize in particular I really enjoy because it usually exposes me to books and authors that were not on my radar. I really try to stay on top of what is new in translated fiction, and the International Booker never ceases to amaze me because it always ends up pulling out about 6 or 7 books that I am very familiar with and were on my radar, but then it usually comes out with another group of books that totally come out of left field for me, and I had no idea about those books. And this year was no exception to that. There were a handful of books that I was very familiar with and had been on my TBR already, so I'm always excited to have a prize kind of force me to read some of those books on my active TBR. And then there were several that I had no idea about either. So it's always an exciting time for reading, but I will say, and I've talked about this before, that my enjoyment level this year has been very much different than in years past for me personally. And I think too that, in my opinion, probably why that was the case for me was because I read my least favorite books from the start. And obviously, when you get a prize list, you have no idea going into it which ones you're going to love and which ones you're going to not get along with. But the other thing that was challenging for me too with the International Booker, and this happens every year, so it's not anything that I'm not used to, sometimes it's very difficult for me, this being a UK-based prize, for me to get my hands on all of the books in the States in a quick turnaround and get them quickly. And also when I'm actually getting them, because some of them are maybe not published in the States yet, maybe they're not even published in the UK yet, and it's going to take a little bit more time. So when I read the International Booker, and usually the Booker and women's prizes as well, that sometimes you're kind of forced into reading the books as they trickle into you or as they come into your possession. And unfortunately for me, some of the books that I was easily able to get my hands on right away were books that I didn't end up loving in the end. So at the beginning of my International Booker journey for this year, I really struggled because I was not reading books that I liked. And in any long list, there are always going to be hits and there's always going to be misses, but my start of the journey was front loaded with books that I did not enjoy. So the reading of a long list for a prize that I usually get along so well with and I usually end up enjoying really didn't live up to the usual expectation that I have for it. So it was quite disappointing. But what I will say is, once the shortlist was announced and I started to focus on those books specifically, I fully was engaged with this prize. These 6 nominated for the shortlist books are all good books in my opinion. They all have a reason to be here. And once I started to realize why I was not having such a good time with the prize, and that all of the books that I really gelled with were the ones that ultimately were just books I hadn't gotten to yet, my attitude toward the prize this year really started to change. So as I look to predict what that ultimate winner is going to be, I kind of felt like I had a tough choice because I thoroughly do appreciate all of these books. So I will get into my prediction in just a minute, but just as a reminder, the shortlisted titles are Not a River by Salva Almada, and this is translated from the Spanish by Annie McDermott. We have Crooked Plow. This is by Itamar Vieira Jr., and this is translated from the Spanish by Johnny Lorenz. We have What I'd Rather Not Think About by Genta Postuma, and this is translated from the Dutch by Sarah Timmer Harvey. We have Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. This is translated from the German by Michael Hoffman. We have The Details. This is by Ia Genberg, and this is translated by Kira Josefsson, and this is translated from the Swedish, I forgot to say. And then we have Mater 2-10 by Hwang Sok Young, and this is translated from the Korean by Sora Kim Russell and Youngjae Josephine Bae. So all of these books I enjoy or am enjoying. There are two that I am still well, actually, technically, there's three that I am still working on, but I am far enough into them at this point to know that I enjoy them, and I'm really liking where the author is taking us, where the story is going, and I feel pretty comfortable with forming an opinion about the books and whether or not I think that they would be the ultimate winner. And those three that I'm actively in the middle of are Crooked Plow, What I'd Rather Not Think About, and Mater 2-10. Now, as far as Crooked Plow goes, I am really enjoying this book, but I think that this book is right up my alley and I'm loving everything that it's doing. But I think that this book is going to be maybe a little inaccessible for a lot of readers. It does have magical realism elements, and I know that that is kind of a very polarizing type of book for a lot of readers. And although it's a genre I love, I don't see every reader out there gelling with it. So that's part of the reason why although I'm enjoying this book very much, I'm not convinced that this is going to be the ultimate winner. As far as What I'd Rather Not Think About, this is another book I'm really enjoying. It's about a really tough subject, and I think that the author is doing a really great job with it. It's in these short little vignette chapters, and I love that format. I love being able to quickly devour short chunks of stories, and this is definitely doing that for me. This book seems just to be a little, in comparison with some of the others, although I'm loving everything about this book, although it's solid and it stands on its own, it's about a very tough subject matter, which once again can also be polarizing and really triggering for a lot of readers. And this is no criticism of the book. I think just in comparison with the other five, even though it deals with suicide, it seems to be the most kind of lighthearted and humorous book amongst the group. And I think that even though it's something I'm very much getting along with, the topic with its polarizing impact and the fact that it just seems a little less serious than the others in its writing style and its humor and wit, I'm not seeing this one ultimately coming through to the end. Now, I am going to talk about Mater 2-10. This is one that I've really gone back and forth with about whether or not this could be the potential winner. I definitely think that this has potential, and if anything is gonna surprise me if my choice doesn't make it, it's it's gonna be this one. This book is ambitious and it is epic and it is big and there's a lot going on here, but I love this book. This book has a lot to say and it is so beautifully written and the translation is gorgeous. And I don't typically read translators' notes and everything before I read a book because I am always so worried that things are going to get spoiled for me. But I did read the one for this book, and the challenge that has been posed to these translators. This book it's Korean, as I mentioned, and it's actually a well-beloved book in Korea. So to take that book that already has a fan base in Korea and be able to translate that, the translators definitely had their work cut out for them with this. And they talk about how difficult it was to translate this. And I just think that it's likely this author's masterpiece, and it's going to be the book that they are forever remembered for. And I definitely see this being that literary achievement and potentially being the winner, but it's not gonna be my prediction. I think there's another book in here that has stronger character development, and it was just a more universally enjoyable read, I think, for a lot of readers, whereas this one is a book that is definitely going to have an audience that loves it, and there's going to be an audience that just thinks it's slow and boring and really struggle with the pacing. So yeah, sadly, this is not my prediction, but I still like it. Now we have Not a River by Selva Almada. I loved this book. This was a great book. This is a great book in the sense that it was atmospheric, and the tone and the setting and the tension that I felt within this book was visceral. The writing was beautiful. It brought up little bits of darkness and that grittier side of books that I love. I love dark books. I love books that talk about tough subjects and, you know, the harsher, not as pretty side of life and kind of the horrible things that fester in people's minds and the things that they do. And this was a great representation. I loved the way that this book made me feel. I loved that it was a tough read at times, and I really think that this author is super talented, and I'm really looking forward to reading some of the other books. This is part of a loose trilogy. If you're not aware, there are 2 other books that have already been published, this being the 3rd. I'm really looking forward to going back and reading the first 2 because I enjoyed this one so much. But once again, I think that even though I loved this book and I had a lot of good things to say about it, I still think that there's one from a literary perspective and a prose perspective kind of outshines this one. And that leaves us with 2 more. So we have The Details by E. Genberg, and we have Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. And this was a tough decision for me because once again, I emotionally connected with both of these books very much. The Details was an unusual book in the sense that it took the author on a journey through her life where we were learning about 4 different people in her life and her experiences with those people in certain periods of time throughout her life. And I think that that was really interesting, and I especially connected with the last section, which was about Birgit, and that section dealt with mental health. It dealt with mental health within a family and how one's personal mental health not only impacts the person experiencing it, but also the people around them. So this was one that touched very close to home for me, and I really thought that the writing was well done. It was a very short and succinct book, and it had a lot to say, but it was done in such a dense way that the author was able to say everything she needed to say in a very short amount of time. But what she ended up saying, and my feeling after I read this book, was actually the time I committed to the book after I finished it was probably more than the amount of time that it actually took me to read it. That's how dense and thought-provoking this book was for me, and I would really love to read more from this author. But I am going to say that my prediction is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. And this might be because this is the most recent book that I finished, but I don't think so. This book, I loved this book. And I loved this book not because it was a great, easy story or enjoying story to read. I enjoyed this book because it tapped into the human condition. It tapped into what it is like to be in a toxic relationship, and I think that the author did just an amazing job of portraying that. And not only did she talk about what was going on in the personal lives of our characters, she also juxtaposed it with the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s and ultimately the reunification of East and West Germany, and the way that she was able to interweave history with the relationships of the characters that were at the center of this novel was fascinating. And her writing is some of the most beautiful writing I have read in a very long time. And it's emotional, it's impactful, it's visceral. I was feeling all of the emotions. This was a book that I was angry at. I was reading parts of it and my pulse was pounding and I was gritting my teeth and I wanted to yell at the characters. This was a book that immersed me, and I just think that it's one that I will likely not forget in a very long time. So I think that probably of the ones that I have read, this was the most literary, this was the most lyrical in its prose, and I just really, really liked this one. So if I had to put money on it, I would say obviously my personal choice is Kairos. If I had to say what my actual prediction would also be, not just my personal one, I think this is the strongest book of the 6. But like I said, if we have a dark horse coming in and taking the title away from Kairos, I would not be surprised if it was Mater 2-10. So although this international booker got off to a very rocky start for me, I think that I'm ending this year's prize feeling quite content and quite happy with everything that came about from it. There are still a few long listed titles that I have yet to get to, and I will do, once again, individual reviews for all of those. I'm sad that I was not able to get to all of it before the prize is being announced, but there's a lot of book prizes that happen around the same time, and it's impossible for one reader to be able to read everything and be fully knowledgeable about everything, especially with life going on in that person's world as well. So, but I still want to read them, and I will still read them, and I still will review all of them because I know that a lot of people like to read long lists and short lists, and they might not be able to get to them as quickly as we would all want to either. So I still want to produce that content for the last of them. And yeah, I likely won't do a reaction video. I will probably just mention it on my next reading recap because that prize will be announced on Tuesday, which is just 2 days from now. But yeah, so with the International Booker done, the next thing we have to look forward to is the OG Booker, which is going to be really interesting this year. I am looking forward. I've already started to come up with my my long list predictions to see what books I think are going to make that long list when they announce that in, oh, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's sometime in August. But yeah, so we still have another Booker Prize around the corner. And yeah, so until we read again, bye.